The phone call came while I was sorting through a box of books for the children's reading club at the library. My 10-year-old son, Lucas, was sitting across from me, engrossed in his favorite comic. The ringtone jolted me out of my thoughts, and I saw Emma's name flash on the screen. It was unusual for her to call during the day, especially since she usually communicated through cold, clipped texts when she needed something. Mark. Her voice came through sharp and devoid of emotion. "We need to talk." "What's going on?" I asked, already sensing the storm behind her words. "I'm filing for divorce," she said, her tone so matter-of-fact it felt like a slap. "I've spoken to my lawyer. I'm keeping the house and filing for full custody of Lucas. It's better this way." I froze, trying to process her words. "Better for who, Emma? You can't just decide that unilaterally." "Oh, I can," she snapped. "I've got everything worked out. You're not exactly a high roller, Mark. You won't win this fight." My pulse raced, but I kept my voice calm for Lucas's sake. He had looked up from his comic, concern written all over his face. "Emma, this is ridiculous. Lucas needs both of us. You're not thinking this through. Don't try to guilt-trip me," she barked. "You've had your chance to prove you're worth something, but let's face it, you're content shelving books and running story time while I've been building a career. I'm the one who provides stability." "Stability?" I repeated, incredulous. "Emma, you've been out more nights than you've been home this year. Lucas barely sees you." Her laugh was icy. "Don't start moralizing, Mark. I've already spoken to Lucas about this, and he agrees it's better for him to stay with me." "Wait, what?" My voice cracked, and I had to take a deep breath. "You've been filling his head with this without even talking to me? That's manipulation, Emma. Call it whatever you want," she said dismissively. "You're just upset because I'm taking control for once. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. My lawyer will be in touch." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, my hand trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. Lucas was watching me, his big brown eyes wide with worry. I forced a smile I didn't feel and reached over to ruffle his hair. "Everything okay, Dad?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, buddy, I lied. Let's finish up here and get home." But as I packed up the books and led Lucas out of the library, my mind was racing. Emma wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to destroy everything I'd worked to build. I wasn't going to let that happen. The days that followed Emma's call were tense, but I didn't want Lucas to feel the weight of it. Still, cracks were already forming. He started coming home with odd comments, things that didn't sound like him. "Mom says if I tell the judge I want to live with her, she'll get me a PlayStation and a new bike," Lucas said one evening, his tone hesitant. I froze mid-dishwashing, the water running over my hands. "She told you that?" Lucas nodded, looking at me as though searching for confirmation that this was normal. "She said it's just how grown-up stuff works. If I say I want to stay with her, then we won't have to fight." I set down the plate and crouched in front of him. "Lucas, listen to me. Nobody should be asking you to make decisions like that. It's not fair to you. You don't have to choose between us. Okay?" He looked uncertain, but he nodded anyway. I hugged him, my anger bubbling just under the surface. I knew Emma had always been good at getting her way, but using Lucas as a pawn? That was low even for her. Things got stranger after that. Lucas started mentioning Mom's friends. "Who are they?" I asked one night as I tucked him in. "Just people she has over," he said, shrugging. "She told me they're friends from work, but they don't talk about work. They just laugh a lot and drink wine. One of them brought me candy." "Did you meet these friends before?" "No," Lucas said, shaking his head. "But she said it's normal. One guy was really loud and kept calling me sport." I forced a smile, even though my chest felt tight. Emma had never been one for friends from work. She liked to keep her social life and professional life separate, or at least that's what I thought. As the days passed, I noticed Lucas growing quieter, more withdrawn. He started asking me things like, "Do you think Mom really loves me?" And, "What if I don't want to say I want to live with her?" "Lucas," I said firmly one evening, "you don't have to do or say anything you're not comfortable with. No matter what happens, I'm here for you." "But Mom said if you lose, I won't get to see you much anymore," he said, his voice small. Hearing those words broke something in me. I realized Emma wasn't just manipulating Lucas. She was trying to rewrite his reality, using fear and promises to bend him to her will. That night, as Lucas slept, I sat in the quiet of the living room, piecing together the fragments of what he'd said. Emma wasn't just planning to win in court. She was stacking the deck with lies and manipulation. And those friends she kept bringing around? They weren't innocent either. It was clear she thought she'd already won. But what she didn't realize was that Lucas, despite his age, was sharper than she gave him credit for. And I was done letting her play these games. The moment I decided to fight back, I knew I needed more than just a good lawyer. I needed the truth. Emma's confidence wasn't just arrogance. It was rooted in something I hadn't uncovered yet. Her manipulation of Lucas and her sudden push for a divorce screamed of a deeper motive. My first clue came from her financial affidavit, part of the paperwork she filed to prepare for the custody battle. As I read through it, something didn't sit right. Her income seemed inflated, and the listed expenses didn't match the life we had shared. For a woman constantly complaining about my boring librarian salary, she had managed to accumulate a surprising number of high-ticket purchases. I handed the documents to my attorney, who flagged a few questionable entries but couldn't dig deeper. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator, someone who could uncover what Emma was hiding. Enter Tom, a grizzled PI with decades of experience in sniffing out fraud and deceit. He had seen it all, and when I laid out my suspicions, he nodded knowingly. "Divorce brings out the worst in people," he said. "If there's dirt, I'll find it." It didn't take long. Within a week, Tom called me with an update. "Your wife's been busy," he said, his voice grim. "She's been funneling money into private accounts. Big sums. She's listed them as family loans on her taxes, but they're fake." My stomach dropped. "Where's the money going?" "To her," Tom said, "and to a man named Greg Bishop." Recognized the name. It didn't ring a bell, but Tom continued. "He's one of the guys she's been bringing around Lucas. They've got a pattern. Greg sets up the fake loans through his business, Emma repays them, and then he moves the money to a joint account they share. They've been doing this for at least 2 years. The air left my lungs. 2 years. That meant this wasn't just a sudden whim. Emma had been planning her escape for a long time, siphoning off funds while keeping me in the dark. "Is that all?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Not quite," Tom said. "I've got proof she's been using some of the money for personal luxuries, trips, expensive dinners, and gifts for Greg. But the kicker? Greg's also been using your house. He's there when you're not, acting like he owns the place." The words hit me like a freight train. The same house where I read bedtime stories to Lucas, where I thought we were building a life. It was just another pawn in Emma's game. "Keep this quiet," I said, my voice cold. "Let her think she's in control. I want every piece of evidence you can get. When this goes to court, I want her lies to collapse all at once." Tom chuckled. "You've got it, Mark. This is going to be one hell of a reckoning." That night, I stared at the documents Tom had sent me. Bank transfers, tax records, and photos of Greg in my house. My anger burned, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let Emma see the storm I was about to unleash. For now, I played along, letting her think she had the upper hand. But in the quiet moments, as Lucas slept and the house settled into silence, I planned. Emma's web of lies was intricate, but she had underestimated me. She thought she had already won, but she had no idea what was coming. The confrontation came to a head on a rainy Friday evening. Emma had dropped Lucas off at my house after her day out with him, which, based on what he'd told me earlier, involved Greg taking him to a basketball game while Emma worked from a cafe nearby. Lucas, visibly confused and quieter than usual, went straight to his room after mumbling a quick good night. I stood in the doorway, watching Emma gather her coat and purse. She was dressed impeccably, as always, heels, designer coat, a smug expression that could cut glass. "Emma," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. She turned, raising an eyebrow. "What now, Mark?" "I'm exhausted." "Exhausted," I repeated, taking a step closer. "From what? Manipulating our son? Spending my money on your boyfriend? Or pretending to be the perfect mom while destroying everything we built?" Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "Oh, here we go," she said, rolling her eyes. Another one of your melodramatic speeches. Mark, you've always been good at playing the victim. My fists clenched at my sides, but I kept my composure. Victim? Is that what you call me? After you've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to Lucas, and plotting to take everything I've worked for? You're not just selfish, Emma. You're cruel. She smirked, a cold, infuriating smirk that only fueled my anger. Cruel? Please, don't act like you're some martyr. I carried this family while you wasted your life in that library. Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell people my husband is a librarian? Embarrassing. My voice rose and I took another step toward her. The only embarrassment here is you, Emma. While I was raising Lucas, teaching him values, you were busy lying, scheming, and parading your boyfriends through my house. Do you think I don't know about Greg? Or the fake loans? Or the secret accounts? For the first time, her mask slipped. Her smirk faltered, and her eyes darted to the side for just a second, enough to confirm she hadn't expected me to know. But she recovered quickly, crossing her arms and leaning against the doorframe. So what if you know? She said coolly. What are you going to do about it? You can't win this, Mark. I have the lawyers, the resources, and Lucas on my side. No, Emma, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. You think you have Lucas, but you don't see what you're doing to him. You're tearing him apart, using him as a bargaining chip, and filling his head with lies. He's 10 years old, Emma. He's not stupid. He sees you for what you are. Her face twisted with anger, and she stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. You think you're better than me? You're pathetic, Mark. A boring, predictable man who couldn't keep his wife happy. Do you really think a judge will side with you over me? I stared at her, my anger giving way to something colder, sharper. Resolve. You've underestimated me, Emma. You've underestimated Lucas, too. You may think you've won, but I promise you, when this goes to court, the truth will come out. And when it does, I hope you're ready to face the consequences of your choices. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the rain tapping against the windows like an ominous drumbeat. Finally, she scoffed, grabbing her purse. Good luck, Mark, she said over her shoulder as she walked out the door. You're going to need it. As the door slammed behind her, I felt the weight of her words, but I also felt something else. Clarity. This wasn't just about saving myself or even winning custody. This was about protecting Lucas from a woman who would do anything, no matter how deceitful, to get what she wanted. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door, the sound of the rain filling the empty space she left behind. Then, I turned and headed to Lucas's room. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her win. The days after my confrontation with Emma felt like a waking nightmare. It wasn't just the betrayal or the looming court battle. It was the whispers, the judgment, and the isolation that followed me everywhere I went. At the library, where I used to find solace, I now felt like an outsider. Colleagues who had once greeted me warmly now gave me sympathetic looks or avoided me altogether. I overheard snippets of conversations that weren't meant for my ears. Poor Mark, he's in way over his head. And Emma's got connections, he doesn't stand a chance. Even people I considered friends seemed to side with Emma. Her polished social media presence, filled with glamorous photos of her career achievements and carefully crafted captions about being a devoted mother, painted her as the picture-perfect victim. Meanwhile, I was cast as the failure who couldn't keep up with his ambitious wife. I ran into one of those so-called friends, Amanda, at the grocery store. She was all fake smiles and condescension. Mark, she said, her tone dripping with pity. I heard about you and Emma. It must be so hard for you, especially with Lucas caught in the middle. I forced a polite smile, knowing where this was going. We're handling it, I said, trying to end the conversation. But Amanda wasn't done. You know, Emma's been so strong through all of this. She's doing what's best for Lucas. Really. It's admirable. Admirable. That word hit me like a slap. Emma had turned her lies into a narrative of strength and sacrifice, and people were eating it up. I wanted to scream, to tell Amanda about the manipulation, the lies, the secret accounts, but I knew it wouldn't matter. People believed what they wanted to believe, and Emma had always been good at selling a story. At home, Lucas noticed the tension even if I tried to hide it. One night, as I was tucking him in, he looked up at me with worried eyes. "Dad," he said softly, "why don't people like you as much as they like Mom?" The question gutted me. "What makes you say that, buddy?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Mom said you're mad because she's better at making friends and stuff. She said you're jealous of her." I swallowed hard, trying to push down the anger that threatened to boil over. "Lucas, listen to me," I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "This isn't about who's better or who has more friends. Grown-ups don't always tell the truth, even if they seem like they do. What matters is that I love you, and I'll always fight for what's best for you." He nodded, but the doubt in his eyes lingered, a painful reminder of the uphill battle I was facing. The worst was a call from an old college friend, Darren. He worked in finance and had always admired Emma's drive. "Mark, I've got to ask," he said after the usual pleasantries. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Emma's well-connected, man. She's got the resources to bury you in legal fees. Maybe it's better to compromise, you know? Give her what she wants and move on." I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone tightly. "Darren, this isn't about money or property. It's about Lucas. I'm not going to compromise when it comes to my son." "Yeah, but courts favor the mother," he said bluntly. "And Emma's, well, she's Emma. She's a force of nature. I'm just saying, think about what you're up against." That conversation haunted me for days. Darren wasn't wrong. Emma was a force of nature, and she had the connections and charisma to sway almost anyone to her side. But the more people doubted me, the more determined I became. Every judgmental glance, every dismissive comment, every condescending word only fueled my resolve. If no one believed in me, that was fine. I didn't need their approval. All I needed was the truth and Lucas. In those moments of doubt and isolation, I clung to one thought. The truth would come out, and when it did, no amount of social status or manipulation could save Emma. The deeper I dug, the darker Emma's world became. Each new piece of evidence felt like peeling back a layer of deceit, revealing just how far she had gone to maintain her web of lies. With Tom, the private investigator, working tirelessly, the puzzle was coming together. But what we uncovered only added more weight to the fight ahead. Started with Emma's emails. Tom had managed to retrieve correspondence between her and Greg Bishop, her so-called work friend. The tone was far from professional. They exchanged flirtatious messages, discussed extravagant trips, and, most damningly, coordinated financial schemes. One email from Greg to Emma read, "Transferred the funds as we planned. Make sure Mark doesn't get suspicious. We're almost there, babe. Soon it'll all be ours." That email was like a dagger to the chest. Babe? It'll all be ours? This wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown partnership in crime. Tom also unearthed transaction records from Emma's hidden accounts. The amounts were staggering. Tens of thousands of dollars had been funneled into private accounts under her name, disguised as loan repayments. Greg had used his fake business as the middleman, making the transactions appear legitimate on the surface. But the records Tom obtained painted a very different picture. "This is solid," Tom told me during one of our late-night meetings. "No judge will look at this and think she's acting in good faith. She's stealing from you, Mark. Plain and simple. Still, I needed more. I wanted irrefutable proof that Emma wasn't just a liar and a thief but also unfit to have full custody of Lucas. That's when I decided to talk to the neighbors. Emma had always been dismissive of our neighbors, treating them as beneath her. I knew she didn't care what they thought of her, which made it all the more likely that she hadn't been careful around them. I started with Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived next door. She'd always been kind to me and Lucas, often baking cookies for him. "Oh, Mark," she said, lowering her voice as she let me into her living room. "I was wondering when you'd come to talk to me about this." I raised an eyebrow. "You were?" She nodded, a mix of sympathy and concern on her face. "I've seen her, you know, bringing those men around while you're at work. It's not just one or two either. There's a different car in your driveway every week." My stomach turned. "How long has this been going on?" "For at least a year," Mrs. Henderson said, shaking her head. "I didn't want to interfere, but, well, I thought you should know. Lucas deserves better than that." Another neighbor, Mr. Cohen confirmed her account. "I've seen them too," he said. "One guy in particular, a tall man with dark hair. He's there all the time. Stays late into the night. Didn't seem like a friend from work to me." The tall man was undoubtedly Greg. The pieces were falling into place, but it wasn't just about catching Emma in the act. It was about protecting Lucas from her toxic influence. The final blow came when Tom found surveillance footage from a nearby gas station. Emma and Greg were recorded there late at night, laughing and kissing openly before driving off together in her car. The timestamp on the footage matched a night she had told Lucas she was working late. With the evidence piling up, my resolve hardened. Emma had lied to me, manipulated Lucas, and stolen from our family, all while parading her affair in plain sight. She thought she was untouchable, but the walls were closing in. I kept all of this quiet, not wanting to tip her off, let her think she still had the upper hand. But as the court date loomed closer, I felt the weight of everything I'd uncovered. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about ensuring Lucas had a safe, stable life, far from Emma's chaos. Still, a part of me couldn't shake the anger. How could someone I once loved turn into this? But there was no time for self-pity. I was in the fight of my life, and I wasn't going to let her win. The closer we got to the court date, the more Emma's facade started to crack. She was still putting on her perfect act in public, posting photos of herself at work events, smiling with Lucas, and writing captions like, "Doing it all for my little man." But behind closed doors, the strain was showing. One evening, Lucas came home from her house looking upset. He dropped his backpack by the door and went straight to his room without saying much. I gave him a little time to cool off before knocking on his door. "Hey, buddy," I said softly as I stepped inside. He was sitting on his bed, staring at a crumpled piece of paper in his hands. "What's that?" I asked, sitting beside him. He hesitated, then handed it to me. It was a drawing, a picture of our family, but something was off. In the drawing, Emma stood on one side, holding hands with a man who wasn't me. Lucas was in the middle, looking sad, and I was on the other side, separated from them. "Mom said that's what it's going to be like after the court stuff," he said quietly. My heart broke as I looked at the drawing. "She told you that?" He nodded, his lip trembling. "She said if I don't say I want to live with her, we won't have nice things anymore, and that you'll be too sad to take care of me." The anger simmering inside me flared. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Lucas, you don't have to believe everything Mom says. She's scared because she knows she might not win. You're smart and you know what's right. Don't let anyone pressure you into saying something you don't feel." He looked up at me, tears brimming in his eyes. "I just want things to be like they were before." I hugged him tightly, silently vowing to protect him from Emma's manipulations. Meanwhile, Tom was still uncovering more of her lies. One night he called me, his tone more urgent than usual. "Mark, I found something big," he said. "What is it?" "Greg's not just some random boyfriend," Tom said. "He's got a record, fraud, embezzlement, the works. The guy's a professional con artist. And Emma's been helping him siphon money from other people. Not just you." My stomach churned. "Other people?" "Yeah," Tom said. "I tracked some of their accounts and found payments from clients she's been working with. She's been running a scheme with him for months, maybe even years. And here's the kicker. One of her clients is suing her for breach of contract. It's all going to hit the fan soon." This was bigger than I'd imagined. Emma wasn't just destroying our family. She was ruining lives far beyond ours. And then came the final revelation that left me reeling. Tom handed me a file of photos and documents he'd compiled. In the middle of it all was a copy of a contract between Emma and Greg, outlining their plan to transfer everything to an offshore account once the divorce was finalized. She had planned to leave with everything, the house, the money, and Lucas, while abandoning me to clean up her mess. I stared at the evidence, my hands trembling with anger. Emma had always been calculating, but this was pure malice. She wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to destroy me. But now I had the upper hand. I had the emails, the bank records, the neighbor testimonies, the footage, and even the contract. She thought she could control the narrative, but the truth was finally catching up to her. As the court date approached, I felt the tension building. Emma had no idea what was coming, and I planned to keep it that way until the very moment I unleashed everything. She thought she had me cornered, but she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with tension. Emma sat at her table, wearing her signature designer outfit, her lawyer beside her, exuding confidence. Across the room, I sat with my attorney, gripping a folder filled with the evidence we had painstakingly gathered. But none of it mattered as much as the person sitting beside me. Lucas. He looked small in the oversized courtroom chair, his legs swinging nervously. I leaned down to him before the proceedings began. "You okay, buddy?" I asked softly. He nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm scared," he whispered. "You don't have to be," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just tell the truth. That's all that matters." When the judge finally called us forward, Emma was the first to present her case. Her lawyer painted her as the perfect mother, dedicated, hardworking, and doing everything in her power to provide a stable home for Lucas. "Mr. Carter," the lawyer said, gesturing toward me, "is an admirable man, I'm sure, but his modest career and lack of resources make it clear that he cannot provide the same level of stability for Lucas as my client." Emma sat there, her face a mask of polished smugness, as if she had already won. Then it was our turn. My lawyer presented the evidence methodically. The hidden accounts, the fraudulent loans, and the damning emails between Emma and Greg. Each piece of evidence chipped away at her carefully crafted image. The room grew quieter with every revelation, and for the first time, Emma's confident facade began to falter. Her lawyer tried to dismiss the claims as irrelevant to custody, but the judge wasn't buying it. Then came the moment that changed everything. "Lucas," the judge said, her voice gentle but firm, "would you like to say anything about where you'd like to live?" Emma's lawyer immediately objected, but the judge overruled him. Lucas hesitated, looking between Emma and me, before nodding. I held my breath as he walked to the witness stand, his small hands gripping the edge of the seat as he climbed up. The courtroom seemed to shrink as everyone leaned in to hear what he would say. "Please don't separate me from my dad," Lucas began, his voice trembling but clear. "I've had enough time to figure out what love really means. It's not about gifts or promises. It's about what you do." He paused, glancing at Emma, then at me. "I've seen my mom bring strangers into our house and lie about who they are. She told me to say I want to live with her, but I know it's because she's scared of losing money, not because she really cares about me." Emma's face turned pale, her confident demeanor shattering. "My dad's different," Lucas continued, his voice growing stronger. "When I was sick, he didn't just give me medicine. He stayed with me all night. When I was scared, he didn't laugh at me. He helped me be brave. Life isn't about what you say, it's about what you do. And my dad proves every day that he loves me with his actions. I want to live with him because I know it's the right thing to do." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge looked visibly moved, wiping her glasses before addressing Lucas. "Thank you for speaking so honestly, Lucas," she said warmly. "You're a very brave young man." Emma was frozen, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't believe what she just heard. Her lawyer scrambled to recover, but it was clear the tide had turned. As Lucas returned to my side, I pulled him into a hug, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." The judge called for a brief recess before delivering her final decision. As the courtroom emptied, Emma shot me a glare that could have cut steel, but all I could feel was relief and pride. Lucas had spoken the truth, and no amount of manipulation could undo that. The game had changed, and for the first time in months I felt hope. The courtroom's recess ended, and the judge returned to her seat, her expression firm and decisive. Emma was trying to compose herself, her polished mask cracking under the pressure. Meanwhile, I sat with Lucas by my side, feeling a calm determination I hadn't felt in months. The judge began to speak, outlining her findings. "It is clear that this case is not solely about custody, but also about financial improprieties and questionable behavior on the part of Mrs. Carter." She paused, her eyes locking onto Emma. "The evidence provided regarding hidden accounts, fraudulent loans, and undue influence on the child is deeply troubling." Emma shifted uncomfortably, her lawyer whispering furiously into her ear. But there was no salvaging this. The judge ruled in my favor, joint custody with me as the primary guardian, and an immediate investigation into Emma's financial activities. The relief was overwhelming, but I wasn't done yet. I had been holding back a final blow, one that would ensure Emma couldn't simply regroup and come after me again. After the ruling, my lawyer and I approached the authorities with the evidence of Emma's and Greg's financial schemes. Tom's meticulous work had laid it all out: fraudulent business loans, hidden offshore accounts, and even emails implicating Greg as the mastermind behind a network of scams. It didn't take long for the legal wheels to start turning. Within weeks, Greg was arrested on charges of fraud and embezzlement. His cooperation was swift and self-serving. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he handed over detailed records implicating Emma as his accomplice. The news broke like a bombshell. Emma's polished reputation crumbled overnight as the story hit local media. Prominent marketer tied to fraud scandal. Photos of her with Greg surfaced, alongside accounts from victims who had been swindled by their schemes. Emma's employers cut ties immediately. Her social media accounts went silent, and her once admiring circle of friends disappeared. She was left scrambling to manage her public image, but the damage was irreversible. And then came the cherry on top. The court froze her accounts, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. The very money she had fought so hard to protect was now out of her reach. When she finally called me, her voice was shaking with desperation. "Mark, you have to help me. They're taking everything." I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. "Emma," I said finally, my tone calm but firm, "you did this to yourself. You could have walked away with your dignity, but you chose to lie, steal, and manipulate. Now you're facing the consequences. You think you're better than me?" She spat, her voice breaking. "I'm a father," I interrupted sharply. "One who's going to make sure our son has the life he deserves. Goodbye, Emma." I hung up, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. In the weeks that followed, Lucas and I settled into a new routine. The house felt lighter, warmer, without Emma's toxic presence looming over us. Lucas smiled more, laughed more, and slowly began to heal. As for Emma, the fraud investigation moved forward, and she faced not only financial ruin but also the possibility of prison time. Her once glamorous life was reduced to a shadow of what it had been. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't about destroying her. It was about protecting Lucas and reclaiming the peace she had tried to take from us. And as I stood in our backyard one sunny afternoon, watching Lucas kick a soccer ball with the carefree joy of a child who finally felt safe, I knew I had won where it mattered most.